Chapter 18. The Ledger of the Saved. The ledger had lived in his head for years, but in 1998, Ethan finally made himself set it in order, because a list you carry loosely is a list you lose pieces of, and he could not afford to lose a single name. He could not write it down, of course. A 6-year-old's list of people to save from futures only he knew would be, if found, the end of everything. So he built it the way he built all his most important things, in the cold and careful place behind the performance, fixed and ordered, and gone over so many times it could not slip. The Ledger of the Saved, he called it, with the grim private humor that was all the humor his second life allowed him. David Cole. First always, the reason for all of it. Faded, The Wet Road, 1999. Strategy, cut the thread to Vance, steer him off the careless jobs, early and small, deepen the family's wealth so he need not take dangerous work, build the trust so deep that, if the day comes, he will listen. Status, in progress, the central work of the whole book of his life. Susan Cole. Faded in the first life, not to a single day but to the long, slow ruin of widowhood, the hollowing, the 2 jobs, the light going out of her. Strategy, save David and the ruin never comes. Her fate was chained to his, break his chain and hers fell away with it. Emma Cole. Faded to the gray, fatherless childhood, and then, somewhere in the tide's long unraveling, to being swept away with everyone else. Strategy, the same as the others for now, keep the family whole, keep them armored and grow strong enough that, when 2027 came, none of them faced it as the helpless did. 3 names. 3 he could reach, because they lived in his house and breathed his air and were already, every day, inside the radius of his quiet protection. And then the 4th name, the one that was harder, because Ethan had not yet met him in this life at all. Before he reached the 4th name, though, he made himself face the 3rd rule again, fully, because the ledger forced it on him. Spend changes only where they matter. He had written that rule after the flood, and he believed it, and it cut him every time he applied it. Because the truth the rule encoded was a hard one, he could not save everyone. He had 42 years of foreknowledge and a coal in his chest and a child's small reach, and against all of it stood the whole vast suffering of the world to come, every accident, every illness, every cruelty he could remember, and a billion more he couldn't. A softer man, or a more foolish one, might have tried to save all of it, and would have spent his foreknowledge into uselessness and blinded himself with 1,000 floods and saved no one. Ethan was not soft, and the second life had burned the foolishness out of him. He chose. The ledger was the choosing made concrete these names, and not the endless others. It was not that the others did not matter. It was that he was one boy, with one coal and one map and one chance, and the only way to save anyone was to refuse to try to save everyone. He let himself grieve that, once, the way he let himself grieve everything once and then set it down. Then he held to the rule, because the rule was what kept the 4 names from becoming none. But the 4th name he allowed himself, beyond the family, because the 4th name was an old debt, and some debts a man pays even against his own rules. Marcus Webb. Ethan had not seen him yet in this life. In the first, they had not met until the 2nd grade, 2 boys assigned to the same table, a friendship that formed the way they form at 7, over a shared joke and a traded snack, and lasted until the water took it. Marcus had been Ethan's best friend through the worst years, the fatherless years, the one bright loyal constant in a gray boyhood. And Marcus had drowned at 14 in a lake on a summer day, in an accident so stupid and so total that 30 years had not dulled the senselessness of it. Ethan had been there. Ethan had not been able to do anything. It was, after his father, the second great failure of his first life, and it had its own permanent cold place in him. He could save Marcus. The drowning was years off, not until the mid-2000s, a near year sharp on the map. There was time, abundant time, to reach the boy and bend the day. But there was a problem the family names did not have. Marcus was not yet in his life. They would not meet until second grade in the natural course of things, and Ethan did not want to leave a thing this important to the natural course of anything. The river had taught him that. He wanted Marcus inside the radius of his protection early, wanted the friendship begun ahead of schedule, the bond built with years to spare, so that when the day of the water finally came, Ethan would not be a bystander but a brother, close enough to bend it. Which meant the next year's work, alongside everything else, was to find a boy he had not seen in 37 years, somewhere in the wide gray sprawl of the city, and engineer a meeting that fate had not scheduled for 2 more years. He turned it over that night, the way he turned over everything and found it good, found it, in fact, a relief. Because the ledger had begun in grief and been carried in fear, and most of what Ethan did was defense, holding fortresses, dulling shine, bracing for floods. But reaching for Marcus was different. Reaching for Marcus was offense. It was choosing freely, against his own cautious rules, to go out into the world and pull a loyal friend out of a future the friend didn't know was coming. Not because the mission required it, not for the family, not for 2027, but simply because Marcus Webb had been good to a grieving boy once and did not deserve the water, and Ethan Cole was, for the first time in either of his lives, in a position to do something about it. It felt faintly like being a person again, instead of only a sentinel. He set the 4th name in the ledger beside the other 3, complete now, 4 people he had loved and lost and meant to keep, and resolved that in the coming year, between the listening inward and the steering and the long, quiet defense of the gray morning ahead, he would find a way to cross paths with a boy fated to drown, and begin, years early, the friendship that might one day save him. The clock was running, as always. But the ledger was whole, and the work was clear, and Ethan Cole closed his eyes that night and reached down into the dark behind his breath with something that was almost, for once, like hope.